Hello, everyone. Welcome to Chat Channel. My name is Tim Hayden, and I'll be your host. We have a super show for you today. Our guest is the multi-talented, award-winning David Andrew Macdonald. David is an American actor, director, and educator. He has been in many TV, Broadway, and films like Law and Order, Loving, Another World, Mamma Mia, Tommy Battles the Silver Dragon, and more. But he is best known for his role as Prince Edward Winslow in the TV show The Guiding Light. Please welcome David to the show. Hello, David. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. I think I've got another button to press here. I get it. Got it. There we go.
Got it. Yeah, Zoom has those questions that pop up that kind of throw people. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing very well, thank you very much. Up here in Minnesota, and it's kind of cold and snowy and beautiful.
How have you been doing with all the snow and stuff up there? I know you.
I love snow. I mean, when my wife and I talked about leaving the New York City area, she had been a somewhat recent Los Angeles transplant, and so she was wanted to stuck it out a little bit. We both closed shows in the beginning of 2020. She closed a show on Broadway on 2020, and I closed in January of 2020, and I closed one March 1st of 2020. And that's when the pandemic hit. We had bought up in Minnesota about 6 months earlier, and we were planning on a move in maybe a couple of years because it was an old farm that needed a lot of work. And then the pandemic hit, and I had just finished playing Satan in Paradise Lost, and I thought, that is a perfect swan song for New York. Time to go. And she said, yeah, I think it's time to go. And so we moved on up over a period of about 6 months.
Yeah, coming from where I am in Kentucky, I don't think I'd want to move away from the snow. I don't think I could handle California, Arizona, where it's just kind of hot most of the time.
Yeah, no, I don't do heat well. And I'm from the South originally, even though a lot of people don't consider Washington, D.C. the South. It actually is. And but I adore snow. And New York is great. I love New York, but New Jersey and snow would come, but then it would melt, and then you'd sort of be living in this grimy slush. And right. Here it's sort of, as soon as it hits, this sort of December snow, it'll stay in some sort of one of its variations until probably March or April.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love the snow for a period.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to go back way to the beginning and ask you what it was like for you growing up.
Well, wow. As I said, I grew up in Washington, D.C. My family was not in government. My father was not, at any rate. My mother had worked for the State Department, but she retired right around the time I was born. And my father was a lawyer who was from Europe originally, from Scotland. My mother was from Massachusetts. So Washington was somewhat new to all of us. My mother had a brother and one sister that had moved to Washington, D.C. as well. He went in and out of governments. He was appointed by different administrations to do different things, but he was not a politician himself. I always refer to DC as the biggest small town in the world. It's like a small town will work around one factory. DC kind of works around the federal government and people that serve that. So that was my growing up.
Pretty expensive up there too.
Oh, it's
to live.
Incredibly expensive in Washington, D.C.
To be so small.
Well, it was actually one of the towns my wife and I talked about moving to because it has a very good, what's referred to in the business as a secondary theater market. And I know most of the people probably watching this knew me from TV, but my thing had always been stage. So when soap operas went the way of God, I'd just gone back to doing theater. And we consider Washington, D.C., but it's really just very expensive, which is one of the reasons we left New York. It was just, it's a great place. New Jersey's a great place. We knew wonderful, wonderful people, but it's a very expensive place to live unless you have a hedge fund. And so, we talked about moving up to the Catskills, the Adirondacks. I love upstate New York. And then, her family's from Minnesota. My wife's family's from Minnesota originally. And so we said, wow, Minneapolis, St. Paul is one of the best secondary markets in the country. Let's think about that. She said, yeah, that sounds good. And so that's when we decided to look out here and found an old beat up farm and went, great, perfect.
Hey, farm, you can't beat a farm. You just can't beat a farm. You
I
need to
love
put in some work. But
I've been accused of being exceedingly urbane, but but actually I just love being out in the snow in the country. So it's very nice for me.
I love it. So when did you know that acting was the path that you wanted to take?
Oh, Lord. I didn't. I mean, originally when I was leaving high school, I was inspecting and being inspected by a 5-year program up at University of Rochester Eastman School of Music, because I thought I was pursuing opera. Funny, because my second wife was an opera singer. The really incredibly sweet, magnificent human being that was from Kentucky. But I realized pretty early on, when I was young, they called it hyperactivity. We now know, as we've gotten older, it's some form of ADHD, which clearly runs pretty strongly with me and my children. And I think maybe my mother was in that world as well. But I think I was going towards opera thing and pursuing music, having gone to a music conservatory, studied theater there, of course, but it was, music is extremely demanding. And I always knew that I just did not have the focus to be able to pursue it. And at some point I backed away and I went to a small undergraduate school in Colorado instead that had a very good small theater department and music. And in particular, I loved early music. So there was a professor out there who was one of the world's experts in Renaissance and medieval music, which I loved, and was doing that. And that's when I kind of fell in love with theater there. And I fell in love with it kind of through a back door, just kind of reading about it. I mean, I knew a little bit about it, but I was not an avid theater person. But reading about it really fascinated me. And I slipped into it and realized, oh, I can do this. I don't have to sit in a practice room for 10 hours a day. I get this part. This is fine. And that's kind of where it was. And then I got up on stage and was bitten by the applause bug a little bit and pursued it from there.
Well, you also graduated from Juilliard, correct?
I did.
So, that ADHD kind of paid off there, I would say.
Well, yeah. I mean, that certainly wouldn't have been the only, alternate brain chemistry that went through a school like Juilliard in any department. I think when I auditioned, I was older when I applied to go to school there and was told by many people, you're too old to go. They only accept younger kids. And I was one of the older at the time that had ever gone to the school. And I started at the age of 26. And wondering if everyone out there is doing the math, get at my age now. But anyway, so I applied but I auditioned for 2 schools, that one and a program that just had opened up at American Repertory Theater in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Those are only 2 programs that kind of I was curious about, but I knew I wouldn't get into either one, especially not Juilliard, because no one gets in. And auditioned and was wildly surprised when I was, because I had already made out my plan to do what I was going to do in Washington, because I was living in Washington at the time, Washington, D.C., of what I was going to do the next year, because I knew I wouldn't get in. And I was very, very fortunate, and I did.
It's awesome. And I mean, I can understand why you got accepted, because we're going to be going through your career a little bit in categories. You did so many Broadway shows. I mean, you were Mamma Mia. You
right.
Shakespeare, Two Shakespearean Actors, Wizard of Oz, Coram Boy. I mean, Rocky.
I had so much fun with it. I mean, the Rocky was fun, a great deal of fun. The Mamma Mia was a great deal of fun. I just adored Coram Boy. I just thought it was a beautiful play out of Great Britain. It came out of the National Theater. I don't think it was New York sensibility. It was basically a melodrama, a huge, big ass melodrama. Can I say ass on your show? It was a big ass.
Yes,
melodrama.
you can. Yes, you can.
which had become sort of interesting in Europe and Great Britain again. But I think New Yorkers looked down their nose at the idea of a melodrama. It had no stock characters, but otherwise it was essentially melodrama. And the music, the melody of the melodrama that backed it up was all of Handel's Messiah. So it was big, broad scope piece. But I just think New Yorkers just sort of poo-pooed it and thought it was silly. And even the British team, they're like, God, we prefer the Broadway production to the national production. But it just wasn't taking off in New York. And so it slipped away after 7 weeks, went down.
Well, I don't mean to dismiss anybody in New York or any Broadway shows. They've got shows like Kinky Boots and the more fun.
It's more the fun stuff, yeah. But there are also some stunning plays on Broadway. I mean, the last show I did on Broadway. I mean, I always said that Broadway is much more of a musical theater world, and it's never been my pursuit. I can't dance to save my life. I can ballroom dance, but I can't do much else. And I can sing when I work on it. But really, sort of acting in the classics have always been my thing. But those plays, just given the amount of money it takes to produce a show on Broadway, you have to get what is referred to in the industry as getting butts in the seats. And as wonderful exposure as I got doing daytime all these years, it's not the same kind of exposure as a film star. So or a big primetime television star. So what they're really looking for on Broadway are those kind of people that can do it. So the last show I did on Broadway was an amazing play. I was not doing it. Bill Nighy was doing it. I think your fans probably know him from Love Actually and
yes.
and the Pirates, what's the Pirates of the Caribbean?
Yes.
Pirates of the Caribbean. I was just say Pirates of Penzance, Pirates of the Caribbean. And number of things. He was just a magnificent actor, magnificent guy, but I was covering him. And I always knew that I would never have those opportunities on Broadway. So, so we decided to make the move out here and enjoy a absolutely beautiful and eminently more affordable way of life with our very young now 8-year-old daughter. She just turned 8.
Really?
Yeah, I've got children spanning quite a distance. Was never my design, but it ended up happening that way.
There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's my brother next to me. I'm 50. The next age is 36. So.
Oh wow. Okay, that's a distance.
There's a gap.
My father was the youngest of 9, and that was spanning, I think, 15 years. So about that time, well, here's a story. My youngest is 8, and my son, who's here in Minnesota now for the fall semester, he goes to school in Iowa, but here for the fall semester, he's 21, and I have a daughter who just started college, who is 18. And then while I was doing Mamma Mia, I got a Facebook hit saying, "Hi, I'm your daughter. We've never met." And I was just like, oh, because I knew of it, but I'd never met her. And I never thought anyone would get in touch with me. And I was trembling. I was so excited. And with her fantastic sense of humor, she said, "Needless to say, the story you're doing is kind of interesting to me," which is about a girl looking for a father. And so that was 2010. I said, "Please come to New York." She flew out. We've gotten to know each other pretty well over the past 12 years. And it has been one of the truly great blessings of my life that she had the strength and the courage and just the greatness that she is to reach out to me. And now through her, I have a grandchild who is now 2 years old, just turned 2.
Hey, grandkids are totally different than kids.
Totally amazing. Different. Well, they're out in Colorado, so I don't get to see them much. I'm trying to figure out how we can see each other again. And so that means I have children spanning about 32 years. That's a big one.
There's 5 of us. My oldest brother is 56, and my youngest brother is 34.
Wow. So that is quite a distance there.
So
that's 22 years.
I'm right in the middle.
Right. I had a dear friend of mine. This is many years ago when I lived in London back in the early 80s. And he was living in London. He was from the Sudan originally. He was living in London because he was in political exile. He was 29. I was 21. He was 29. Or 28. He had a younger sister who was 17 and had an older brother who had just died in his early 70s. He had 35 brothers and sisters spanning all of that amount of time. His father, a remarkable individual, he was just one of the sweetest, kindest people I've ever known in my life. And he had many brothers and cousins who had come up to London because he had an uncle who lived in Khartoum who needed a kidney transplant. So he got the uncle to come up and find out all the cousins and brothers to come up because the facilities in Great Britain at the time were better than what I could find in Khartoum. And so they found out which cousin brother could give the kidney. But I met all these men, and they were some of the sweetest people I've ever known. But he had, 35 brothers and sisters spanning, what would that be, about 55 years?
Oh, at least.
His father had died 10 years previously at the age of 95, which means, just doing the math, he had sired, if you will, his last child in his late 80s. And when I did the math on that one, I just raised a glass to my friend and said, may we all have that kind of staying power. And he laughed.
Exactly.
I think of him all the time, and I miss him very much. We lost touch.
I had mine young, and that was by design, because I wanted them, when I was still young enough, I wanted them to be old enough. I could still do things, and they're out.
Right.
It was well thought out. So back to your acting. Was Law and Order or Another World your first on screen?
Oh, Law and Order. I think. Let me think. Yeah, it was Law and Order. I think I did that. That was right after I graduated. Sort of like, I graduated. Actually, graduation ceremony. I booked a gig in Philadelphia, so I missed my graduation. And then I went straight from that gig to a gig in upstate New York. And so that would have brought me sometime in July. And as soon as I got back in July, I think I got my Law and Order gig.
Well, let me just say before I go on, your resume is incredible. Incredible. Every single thing that you have selected to do is a well-known show. Everything. And I rarely see that when I'm researching for celebrities. That's rare. Usually they're in a B film or one lesser known, or
I would. Well, I've only done 2 films, and both of them, I mean, they're B films. They're unknown indie films. Although Forbes picked one of them as in the top 100 sci-fi movies of all time, which is great. I think it came in at number 99 or 100, and no one's ever seen it. And the other one was put together. It was a fraught film, but the man who wrote it and also composed it, because he's primarily a film composer, and starred in it. Although he said later, I'm not an actor, I shouldn't have done that. But he put that film together, and that was, I thought, a wild, interesting film called Tommy Battles Silver Sea Dragon. Very bizarre. But his you can see it, find it on Netflix. It's bizarre, but it's he wrote all the music for it. It was really, I sat down and listened to it. It was almost like Rachmaninoff. It was great and really catchy tunes.
I had that on here to talk to you about. We'll jump to it because you were in it in 2018. I watched it, and did I miss something? There's no speaking parts. It's entirely sang, isn't it?
Oh, Tommy Battles?
Yes.
Oh, you have seen this then?
I watched it just a couple of days ago. Thanks.
Oh, you did? Wow. Let's do your research.
Yes.
I think almost all of it is sung. And it's interesting. It seems as if he's on trial for the death of his twin brother when he was a child, or his younger brother when he was a child. And you realize that's part of the fantasy world also, as he's just trying to come to terms with this lost relationship he had because he was too closed off to say yes to her who said she loved him. And he puts himself, almost his like ego and id puts himself on trial for losing this beautiful opportunity at love. And it's a hard thing to really see. You have to get your head around it. And but I just love him. He's from Michigan originally. We shot the film in Michigan, but he lived for many years in New York, and then he moved. In the pandemic, he moved up to Quebec. He said to work on his writing and his French, and then he finally said, "Yeah, I'm gonna go back to Europe," because he had done his. He's American originally, but he did his master's degree in film composition in the Netherlands, I think. And I think the last I spoke to him, he was moving to Berlin. He had some friends there, and he just, he's a fascinating international guy, and really quite a beautiful soul, I always thought.
Well, that surprised me that he told you that he he didn't think he should have done it, because the very first scene is him coming out of the ocean in reverse.
Oh yeah, buck naked. Yeah, it's great.
Buck naked. I'm thinking, there's no way I could do that to begin with. Then you said that, and I'm like, oh, I definitely, if I hesitate, there's no way.
Yeah, he's great, and a beautiful composer. I mean, my wife, when she listened to the music, she said, "Oh my God, this stuff is catchy." It does. It's kind of like, great pianists like piano composers like Rachmaninoff meets pop music. It's just it's beautiful stuff. To hear the music alone is great.
And you play the prosecuting attorneys.
I always play the bad guy.
But all of your arguments are saying, and like you said, that music, I love the score. The music, it was great. I mean, I'm impressed by him.
It's great. And Alison Fraser was in it. She and I crossed paths all the time. We did. First musical I did in New York was Charles Busch wrote the book, and Rusty McGee, her husband, wrote the music. He has since passed away, unfortunately, passed away in the early aughts. But I think she was nominated for a couple of Tony Awards for Secret Garden, and something else, I forget what it is. She was the judge in that movie. She's great. And she played my daughter/wife in Paradise Lost, when we did that in New York, the last thing I did there.
Well, during Tommy Battles the Silver Sea Dragon, did you all do pre-recording songs, or did y'all sing it there as it was being recorded?
Yes and no. We sang it there, but the sound was not working. The production was fraught with a number of technical issues. It was not working, so I had to go in later on, and a number of us went in later on and recorded it. And I think since a good portion of the stuff we needed, I think a good portion of the stuff that I had done on the floor did not work. But also it was originally pitched way, way high in my register. It actually worked up there, but when he remixed it, he wanted me to come back and sing it an octave lower. So it's funny, the performance, which is I'm way up here, but when I sing it, it's coming back as a baritone, and it just, I can, I'm looking at my face, seeing my face, trying to get those really high notes, sometimes not prettily, but knowing when it's pitched lower, and it looks so weird. He's like, yeah, it worked better in my score. And I said, that's fine. Yeah.
I liked it. It's something. If you like musicals, I think you'd like it. That's because it's
good.
Great.
Yeah, it's not exactly as straightforward as Mamma Mia.
Well, like you said, it's taken you one direction, and then you find out that's not accurate, and it takes you to another direction, and
right.
It just kind of keeps you guessing.
Yeah, it's definitely in the world of art film. Definitely. Yeah, and met some great people working up in Detroit. There's a big old Masons Hall, one of the largest in the world, Freemasons Hall, that they built sometime very early 20th century, but a gigantic place, gigantic structure. I think while we're in there, I think Eminem and like Ed Norton or one of those actors were off somewhere else in the building shooting a music video. But it was a wild, big place, and just going around and getting lost in it. And it was just wild. It was wild. Loved it.
It sounds pretty cool. Well, I'm going to jump back to 1999 when you landed your role on Guiding Light.
Sure.
You played till it ended in 2009. There were a couple little gaps, but you pretty much were there. Do you remember your audition on that?
I do. Well, no, I didn't. It's funny. I didn't audition for Guiding Light. I I had done the last 8 months of another Procter & Gamble show, Another World, over on NBC, where I was voted, the storyline was voted the only story time in daytime history more ridiculous than Reva's cloning. I thought, that I don't know who Reva is, but I'm very proud. That makes me very proud. But when I went over the guiding light, Kim Zimmer came up to me and said, "Oh, you're the one who's more ridiculous than mine." Yes, I but that's actually, I'll tell you, that is probably the greatest professional piece of flattery I ever had when I got that one, because I was called up by the casting director over Another World, Jimmy Bohr, I think it was Jimmy Bohr. And Jimmy Bohr had crossed over at a couple of theaters, or maybe just Shakespeare Theater in New Jersey, because he directed Shakespeare. I never worked with him, but we knew each other crossing over. So he knew my work. And my agent called me up and said, "Hey, give me Jimmy Bohr over Another World a call, because he wants to talk to you about something. He knows you don't audition for contract roles on daytime, but he wants to give him a call." I said, "Okay, great guy." Called him up, and he said, "David, I'm in a predicament." And I said, "What?" He goes, "I've got to cast a 221-year-old facially deformed time traveling scientific genius, and I don't know anyone on either coast who can pull it off again, except you. You've got to come in and audition for this thing." And I went, "My God, that is the nicest thing anyone has ever said to me. A little strange, but really nice." And so I went in, I auditioned, and I didn't get a call back saying they love you, but they're going to try to double cast someone else in the show. I said, "That's fine." They tried that for a couple of weeks. Wonderful actor they used over there, but the type of character that character was not something everyone can do. And so they had me come in later on. I took it over. And then when that closed up, they brought me right over to Guiding Light. I think Another World will start airing when I started shooting Guiding Light. But I was only supposed to be in Guiding Light for the first 3 months. It's a mini contract, setting up basically Richard, my brother, as that character. And then they took us down to Puerto Rico. And then when I died, I fell over the side of a cliff. And the head director at the time, Bruce, God, I forget his name now. It's terrible. He's such a great guy. He took the shot over the keys. He goes, "Okay, now we got to do the shot of me. I'm dead." And he said, "Now we got to do the shot of your hand twitching, because I know they're bringing you back." And so he did the thing of my hand twitching down the bottom of the cliff. And then, of course, they brought me back, and I was there for 6 years or 7 years, whatever it was, which is great. And then whatever the 3 years after that, when I was off contract or came back and forth on many contracts, but it was fun.
Well, this tells you how well of an actor you are, especially in Guiding Light. A fan and myself both thought your accent was your actual accent. We didn't know it was a character accent.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, there was a woman I ran into at a fan luncheon one time. I forget her name. She was very kind. And she said, "You had me fooled, and I'm British."
You had me fooled.
And I said, "Wow." And she said, "I was watching you for a couple of years until I realized, oh, wait, he's an American." And I said, "Oh, how did you tell?" She goes, "The internal T." And I went, "Oh, did I say something like butter?" She goes, "Yeah, you said butter, not butter." And I went, "Oh, okay, busted." That's the only mistake I heard in all those years. I said, "That's pretty good."
Well, it must have taken a Brit to catch that, because I wouldn't have.
It's a hard one.
I didn't, and I watched Guiding Light. That was one of my favorite shows. So you didn't even realize how big of a role it was going to become, since you only signed for 3 months.
Yeah, no, it was 3 months, and then I was still there primarily supporting Richard's storyline, and then about a year and a half into it is when Edmund's story really took off. A lot with Beth Chamberlain. Beth Chamberlain and I had a huge story together. She's so fantastic. She's so much fun to work with. I love Beth Chamberlain. She was always willing to let the story go in some bizarre direction. Like, yeah, let's do that. So we had a blast working together. I loved her.
Tina Sloan's helped me try to get her on the show. Tina was on last week.
Oh, Tina. Oh, yeah, she's wonderful. Yeah, she's great. She's great.
Yeah, you were bringing up people you worked with. You worked with some of the greats. I mean, Marge Doucet, Ron.
Oh,
Hayes,
she was lovely. Yeah.
Joan Collins, Tom Christopher. I mean, those.
Yeah.
those are huge. I mean, you even had an affair with, I think it was Joan Collins, if I'm not mistaken, when it was Alexandra.
I think they were setting that up. They were setting me up to be Joan Collins' love interest, and then I think she maybe because of that, she politely sort of left the show after a couple of months. I think also, I mean, daytime is a very difficult row to hoe, and I think it's for some people and not for other people. I mean, there was.
Well, Tina said that last week. She said that when Joan was on, that it was not what she was expecting,
No.
and it wasn't. She wasn't happy about it when she figured out how it was going to go.
Yeah, it's a hard thing because it can't always be about one person. It can't always be about you. It's not the way that the daytime is done, and if it's going that way, it's really not working. And it was hard enough, I think, for a lot of us on the show. It's like, especially if your main story for like 6 months and all of a sudden you become secondary or tertiary story, you're like, what happened? Did I do something wrong? And also your paycheck is getting a lot smaller.
Not only that, I tell people in here all the time that if they want a truly trained actor or actress, get somebody from daytime. Y'all go through so many pages so fast, whereas nighttime, it's more of a sprint kind of let's get it done in a week.
It is a very different animal. Very different animal. Yeah. And the one thing I noticed too is interesting too is sort of the fan reactions, which were, I mean, you could walk down the street and if someone knew you, it's not as if you're Brad Pitt or Tom Cruise where people are screaming and there are thousands of people chasing you down. In daytime, it was more of a world of people thought they knew you because you go into their house every day. So the sort of the fame relationship, if you will, it was really lovely. It was really, I mean, people now, it's a long time and they don't remember, but it was really lovely to bump into someone and say, hey, I know you. There was sort of a gentleness about it. And that I always thought was really quite lovely. And fan events, everyone was very sweet and fun. And I was surprised by how much I actually enjoyed doing it. I didn't think I would.
So your character, Edmund, where do you think he is today? Where do you think him and Jeffrey have made it? Because last we remembered, it was cat and mouse. Y'all were chasing each other all over the place.
Yeah. I thought I actually was very appreciative of that. I mean, I didn't know, depending on who was writing the show and who had set it up, I think the original setup of Edmund and Jeff and Richard was really quite interesting.
Yes.
And it was really, and in an odd way, moving. And in many respects, a traditional villain where and by traditional, I mean almost like a melodramatic 19th century Victorian villain, where once you understand his background, you understand why he's a bad guy. And so this whole idea that Richard was the older brother, I was the younger brother, but my father loved him and just thought and hated me. That's where it comes from. It makes you come teary thinking about it. But it's that idea that, I remember one time one of the writers later on said, well, you tried to kill your brother all the time. And I just went to the writer and said, no, my life isn't worth living unless my brother is there to witness my success.
Right.
Because do I hate him? Yes. Do I love him? Yes. It's that odd relationship. It's more than sibling rivalry. It's need. I need him to witness my victory over him because that's the only reason I exist. And then, I'd get responses from people fans that never thought that would necessarily identify with me. They were identifying was like, I know what it's like to be pushed into the ground and to do anything to rise up against it. And that's not because people would disapprove would approve of what Edmund was doing, because what a lot of stuff did was really awful, especially when they finally wrote him off the show. It was just awful and ridiculous. But anyway, those original, number of years were really, it was, you could understand where he's coming from because he needed in a way to prove himself to his father, who was long dead and never could. So it had to be Richard that he would do it in front of. So it was really quite beautifully written and crafted that way. And then as what happens with daytime, because they're writing so much, things get discarded, and it really hurts when you see a particular piece of storyline go away. But it's hard. But I loved that stuff, that San Cristobal storyline, because I thought a lot of it was pretty clever and meaningful. Whether it came across that way ultimately or not, but
Edmund wasn't always a bad guy. I mean, he was at the beginning, then he kind of redeemed himself there for a little bit.
When you fall in love with Cassie. When he fell in love with Cassie, yeah.
Right. And I can't remember the little boy's name, that her son that you
Jonathan.
Jonathan.
No, that's
it.
Kim. That's Kim. That was Reva's son.
But you became really good friends with him, and
you
used him to get you started telling him that his mama wasn't no good.
Oh, did I? I'm sure that was just misunderstood.
But in my mind, had they left the island once it was finally determined he was the actual heir to the throne, I think he would have backed off for a while. But no, they all had to stay there and keep antagonizing Edmund. And of course, Edmund responded in like Edmund way. I'm going to get you.
Exactly. No, I really miss him.
I do too. I do. I miss Guiding Light a lot. I mean,
yeah. At one point, one of my friends on the show was talking to me. He goes, "Oh yeah, my family calls Guiding Light the Edmund hour now." Really? That's awful. It's great, but it's awful.
I joke. I don't really joke, but I bring it up a lot on the show because they took it one storyline, and you already brought it up, the clone. They took that, and it was just
Reva's cloning.
God,
I never saw it, so I don't know, but I heard about it. It was great. Kim was always so funny on the topic.
Well, Tina last week, she said that they'd be back there laughing about it, because Kim's like, "Oh, you're not the one who has to do it." So they're cracking up, laughing at her about it.
Yeah, I could see Kim saying that. There were so many great people on that show. I miss them. I wish them all well. I was so sad when I heard about Marge passing away and then Jerry passing away.
Yes,
he was so kind to me so often. He was a great man.
I just thought of something. Two of my favorite characters, Edmund, they should have put you and Jenna together, because Fiona Hutchison is one of my favorite actresses.
Oh yeah. I almost did a play with her in New York, I think. And then I didn't. I think this was many years before I did soaps. But
she's going to be on the show. Is Bradley Cole.
Good.
Have it scheduled yet, but they've both agreed to. Now,
please give Brad my regards.
People watch this chat channel. They're probably sick of me saying this. Fiona Hutchison by far has one of the best Instagram pages.
Oh wow, yeah. Except I'm so bad with social media that I don't. Yeah,
it's she does it by herself on. She's got a pet chicken named Chicky Mama, and This chicken is the only chicken I've ever seen with the personality. She knows to come in and get tea. I mean, she knows everything that Fiona's telling her. it's time to go in the coop. It's just incredible.
Oh, that's great. We're actually getting chickens next fall. So next spring. So yeah,
as expensive as eggs are getting right now.
The what?
Way up there. I said, as expensive as eggs are getting right now.
Oh yeah,
the best time to get it.
That's not a bad one.
Well, you spoke of having children. Are any of them showing interest in acting?
My son actually last spring did a play in his college. The first play he's done, I think, the second grade Thanksgiving play. And he, it was quite an experience for him. It was a David Lindsay Bear play called Rabbit Hole, I think, for which Mr. Lindsay Bear won. Did he win the Pulitzer for that? Not sure. And he may have for that play. Anyway, but a great play, very difficult play. It's about a couple that has lost a child and coming to terms with that. Which is very different from doing the second grade Thanksgiving play. Sure. But he did that. But I don't think he's an interest in it. He's primarily a musician, trombone, but he composes on guitar and piano. And the eldest child I referred to earlier that I just met 12 years ago, she, I think, independent of me, didn't really know about me, I don't think, but or what I did. But one of her great loves has always been musical theater. She's performed it her whole life. She now teaches. She teaches science, but she still does it as sort of her life and her hobby when she's able to. And my not youngest, but younger daughter, she is pursuing classical voice right now. And my 8-year-old daughter, of course, she wants to be an astronaut, a ballet teacher, and a mother. She wants to be those 3 things, because that's the traditional mix.
Right. For sure.
Especially when you're 8. So, but she's pretty lively and great. So,
well, it just kind of proves what I talk about on here a lot, that art is genetic, I believe. Art is genetic.
A lot of things are. Yep.
Majority, 99% of the celebrities it's been on have had artistic family, whether it's acting, singing, painting, or their children are doing it. So
well, it's interesting because influence has a lot to do with things. It's sort of the nature nurture issue, conflict, that old thing. But it's interesting because going back again to the daughter I met when she was in her late 20s, drove out to the airport to pick her up when she flew in, and 30 minutes to our conversation driving back into Manhattan from New Jersey Airport, Newark, New Jersey. We've just been chatting back and forth, of course, because we had a lot of time to cover and chatting back and forth. And there was a pause in the conversation, and she turned to me with my sense of humor, and she goes, "Well, it's very nice to meet me." And I laughed for a second, and then my jaw hit my chest, and I said, "That's my sense of humor." Now, her mother is a remarkable human being. I mean, she was in one of the most competitive pre-med programs in the country. She and one other fellow were taken off the curve. Very bright, but classic type A personality. I am not type A. Her daughter, that child is a total type B personality, but an ability to latch into a type A. So that family does not have my sense of humor. And I just turned to her and I said, "Oh my God, that's my sense of humor." She goes, "Oh, I don't have the sense of humor of anyone in my family." And it became apparent to me, skin color, eye shape, nose shape, height, all that kind of stuff, that is genetically selected makes sense. But the whole idea of a sense of humor is genetically selected. That's bizarre. I mean, so bizarre, because I had no responsibility bringing her up. But the idea that, and she said, "Oh yeah, no, I've always had a strange sense of humor from my family." It's kind of remarkable. It's kind of, it just gave me pause at that point. So I mean, my phone's giving me, hold on, so I need to look at that quickly. Sorry.
But yeah.
Okay, great.
So happy.
Great. Sorry, I just need to check that. It was about the person who's hosting me. I'm not at my place. I'm using a friend's internet, because my internet, the farm is so bad, and he's got more connection down here. So he's let me glom onto his internet. So I just need to check that from him, that message. Ta-da!
Well, I just wanted to thank you for being here and chatting with me today. I hope you come back.
Oh, it's so nice. I mean, it's so nice to meet you after going back and forth. Again, thank you so much for being patient with my crazy schedule. It's just so nice to be here. And there's a small theater group that I met when I was here, worked with them when they were down in Stillwater. Now they're up here, further north in Minnesota, and we're putting together a kind of fun last minute reading of a very small cast Christmas Carol in this old village that we live in, that has a small theater up in their town hall. So we're doing that. Little things here and there. It's great fun. So if you know anyone who's in the eastern Minnesota area, please send them over to on the 18th of December to the Village Hall in Marine on St. Croix, and they can see a fun little stage reading of A Christmas Carol.
I actually do know a couple of people up there. I'll try to see if they can come over there and see.
You know people up in this area? Oh, great.
Yeah, I run a support group for necrotizing fasciitis survivors, so I've got people all over the world.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful.
Everywhere. But yeah, if you would hang on in the backstage for a few minutes, don't hang up. I'd be back there and talk to you in just a couple minutes.
Sure. I'll be right here. I hope I
Thank you
pressed the
so
right
much.
button. You bring me back.
No, you don't have to push anything. I'll
Okay,
take care
good.
of it all. Just
Okay,
hang up.
Okay.
I'd like to thank David Andrew Macdonald for being here today and chatting with us. I would like to thank the NFF for sponsoring our show. For more information on necrotizing fasciitis, please visit www.necfasc.org. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel for more upcoming episodes. Remember to be kind to one another and have